Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Kelly, and I am honored to be one of the Hamilton Township Board of Education members. I'm here, I have two books, and I'm going to start out with one of my favorites, Enemy Pie. It's by Derek Munson and illustrated by Tara Callahan King. Oops, there we go. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a tree house in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks. And I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out on the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend Stanley was invited. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, Dad said. He pulled a really old recipe book off of the kitchen shelf. Inside there was a worn-out piece of scrap paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. You may be wondering what exactly is enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret, he couldn't even tell me. I decided that it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I'll tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my attention, and my mind was working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he needed those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang, but it never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients for enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from the kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell that he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang, and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to your enemy? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath became stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There's one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary. But it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy pulled open the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. He walked around the corner to say hello. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. Wait a second, did I skip a page? Oh my goodness, I did, I'm so sorry. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch, and after lunch, we went to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that, since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it went right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. My tree house was my house. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her in. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him in. And if Jeremy wanted in, "Can we go inside?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't that bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. "Wow," Jeremy said, looking at the pie. "My dad never makes pies like this." It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. "Jeremy, don't eat it," I said. I think it's a bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something." Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumbled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. "If it's so bad," Jeremy said, "then why has your dad already eaten half of it?" I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was already eating the enemy pie. "Good stuff," he mumbled through a mouthful. And that was all he said. I sat there watching. And then they were both eating enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating. And neither of them was losing their hair. It seemed safe enough. So I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how it works. And I don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or if their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get to answer, because I just lost my best enemy. Thanks for listening. I think we have time for one more. All right. So I have a second book. It's called It Takes a Village by Jane Cowen-Fletcher. It's dedicated to Brad and Sojourner Hope. The sun was just beginning to climb into the sky, but the villagers had been up for hours. It was market day. "Yummy?" Mama said. "You must take care of your little brother today while we're at the market. I'll be too busy selling the mangoes." "Come, Cocal," Yummy said. "I will watch you today, all by myself." "All by yourself?" Mama asked, and smiled at what Yummy said. Mama knew better. Mama picked up their mangoes, and Yummy picked up Cocal. She felt very grown up as she walked out of the family compound beside Mama. They joined the stream of people walking into the village. People came from all around to sell their goods and buy whatever they needed. Market day was also a time for visiting. The greetings started the moment they stepped on the paths into town. "Hello, how are you? How is your family?" Yummy helped Mama set out their mangoes. One of the other fruit vendors said, "Yummy is a big girl now. She's a lot of help to you." "Yes," said Mama. "She is going to watch Cocal for me today." "All by myself," Yummy said. "All by yourself? Yagay!" The woman marveled. They smiled and nodded, but they knew better too. When the mangoes were all in neat piles, Yemi asked if she and Cacao could take a look around the market. Mama said, "Yes, but don't be gone too long." Yemi had not walked very far when Cacao became restless. "He must be hungry," she said. She set him down for just 1 minute so she could buy some peanuts. And Cacao wandered off. "Chow!" Yemi cried when she turned around and discovered Cacao was gone. She put the peanuts in her pocket and she hurried off to find him. "Where could he have gone?" she said. As Yemi searched for him, she began to worry. Cacao must be hungry. But he was not. Cacao must be thirsty. But he was not. Cacao must be frightened. But he was not. Cacao must be hot, but he was not. Cacao must be tired, but he was not. Finally, after searching for him everywhere, Yemi stopped and cried out, "Cacao must be lost!" But he was not. Just across the path from where Yemi stood, Cacao was waking up. "Is this your cacao?" the mat vendor asked. "Yes," exclaimed Yemi as she scooped up her brother. "Thank you so much for taking care of him," Yemi said to the mat vendor. "Oh," he chuckled, "I was not the only one." He pointed to where Cacao had come from. Yemi thanked him again and headed off in that direction. She said thank you again, and again, and again, and again. "We've been gone a long time, Cacao," Yemi said. "Mama must be worried." But she was not. Mama knew better. As my mama told me, and her mama told her, I will tell you. You weren't alone today. Yemi, we don't raise children by ourselves. It takes a village to raise a child. Okay. Thank you for listening to my second story. Have a great day, everyone, and enjoy World Read Aloud Day.